At the beginning of October 1851, the exhibition was declared officially closed, and the problem then arose of what to do with the Crystal Palace. Here we have another caricature showing the dispersion of the work of all nations, steam engine, but also elephants and all kinds of other things, leaving the Crystal Palace to return home. Emptied, the building seemed magnificent. Queen Victoria in her journal describes a visit she paid to the building once emptied, saying that this was so beautiful. And Queen Victoria was not super sentimental about architecture, but she declared that it was so beautiful that it was almost a pity that it had to go. For the building had been conceived as a temporary structure. But of course the temptation was great to try to make it permanent, and proposals were made in that sense. Paxton himself tried to convince the authorities to keep it, to, for example, transform it into a giant winter garden, something in which, Londoners could experience the charm of spring throughout the seasons. And we're back to this environmental theme that I already mentioned, that has, of course, to do with the relation between the Crystal Palace design and the greenhouse design. The decision was nevertheless made to dismantle the Crystal Palace and to free the garden, Hyde Park, and to restore Hyde Park as it was before. But Paxton was definitely an entrepreneur. In parallel with working with the Duke of Devonshire, he had launched a series of enterprises, journals, as I mentioned, and a number of other things, and he decided actually to rebuild another Crystal Palace, larger, more beautiful, and to transform it into a private venue for the entertainment of the crowds. This was done in Sydenham, in the suburb of London, where he built a structure which is often confused with the first structure, although it is actually quite different. The new Crystal Palace was actually a much more complex structure, higher, with actually 3 transepts, a main one and 2 lateral ones, a kind of Crystal Palace or on steroids that was conceived as a kind of permanent entertainment place. And the genealogy that I mentioned earlier between Theme Park and the Crystal Palace is actually a reality through Sydenham, which can be in some ways described as one of the earliest theme parks ever conceived. So this larger Crystal Palace did not have the crisp edges that we found so alluring in the 1851 buildings, but it was nevertheless a very large construction, better built. This time Paxton had the time to work out all the details of the assemblage, and much more stable. Actually, the building survived until the 1930s, in which a fire consumed it entirely. So this was a theme park. Here you have a painting of the time. You arrived through railways and you had garden, fountains, and all kinds of displays linked to ideas of exotic travel, travel in time, ideas that are very close to this idea of entertainment that characterize still theme parks today. Inside the Sydenham Crystal Palace, one found a mix of plantations, statues, etc. One could travel to ancient Egypt, as here, but also to Rome, Greece, etc. The new Sydenham Crystal Palace was not as strikingly modern as the first construction, probably because the hurry of 1851 made the building less ornamented than its later version. With the new Crystal Palace, there were more concessions made to the 19th century taste because one had more time to refine the design. But nevertheless, the Sydenham Crystal Palace was to remain also an icon of modernity, and it was photographed in a way suggesting a kind of genealogy between 19th century construction and 20th century modernity. As here, this is a photograph taken by 2 photographers linked to the modern movement in the United Kingdom, and we can see the suggestion of modernity going from the 19th century to the 20th. 1851, the London Great Exhibition, the first of a series of events that rhythm the life of the second half of the 19th century. The Crystal Palace was the first of a series of monumental construction that marked the epoch of World Fair. This was rapidly an international phenomenon. America, for example, had an exhibition in New York a few years after the London exhibition. This is the New York Crystal Palace, actually quite an intriguing structure with this central dome, but pretty much based on the Crystal Palace idea. Nowhere were a world exhibition as important as in Paris. Paris became the capital of world exhibition during the second half of the 19th century, with exhibition in 1855, 1867, 1878, 1889, 1900. Here we have the 1867 exhibition, which is also the last Parisian exhibition to be hosted mostly in a single giant building. A much more complex pattern, this giant oval, than the initial Crystal Palace, but still following the idea of a world inside a building. Later exhibition would explode the single building into a series of massive pavilions, but this is another story. What's the meaning of all that? Probably, of course, these ideas of technology, progress, human industry, all these things we've seen. But I'd like to evoke a number of other themes that are linked to the rise of world exhibition. The first one is, of course, the need for symbols. And I mentioned Paris. It's quite revealing, it's quite fitting that actually the most famous Parisian monument is actually a legacy of a world exhibition. The Eiffel Tower was built in 1889 for the exhibition held in Paris that year. Technology remained throughout the 19th century a major theme of world exhibition, where the largest building of the 1889 Parisian exhibition was not actually the Eiffel Tower, but the Great Gallery of Machine, which was actually the largest gallery of that type ever built. We often keep in mind the trusses and the ballet, once again, of iron pieces, but one must not forget the ornamentation and the intricate link between ornament and structural performance that characterized world exhibition. World exhibition were super ornamental because this was also provided an opportunity to try to re-articulate art and technology, architecture and engineering, ornament and structural expression. This is actually the entrance of the Great Gallery of 1889, and as we can see, this is very different from the black and white picture we're often provided with. World exhibition also provided a way, because they became much more complex urban venues, almost like districts in the city. They provided gradually an opportunity to rethink not only of industry, but also of the city that hosted the exhibition. For example, the Chicago 1893 exhibition provided an opportunity for American urbanists and architects to test ideas that would later give birth to the City Beautiful movement. It is well known that the Burnham Plan for Chicago owes something to this seminal experience, as if the city itself was becoming a giant exhibition. I've said a number of times throughout this presentation that the Crystal Palace was mythical. Part of the paradox of history of architecture is that it feeds upon the concrete, objective relation between a building and its period, between a building and the social and political forces of the time. But history of architecture feeds also upon myth, because architecture is not only a question of materiality, it's inseparably about materiality and imagination. From that perspective, the Crystal Palace is definitely a very important moment. For this building actually was for a very short period, at least for its 1851 avatar, a material reality. It remained for a much longer time, probably until today, an important landmark in our architectural imagination.